DLC. Downloadable content, more known by its abbreviation, DLC, has been a prominent part of the video game industry for decades now, for better or worse. In its inception, DLC was a neat way to expand onto existing games. DLC took on many forms over the years, with many precursors like the expansion packs for various PC games. But it was Sega's swan song, the Dreamcast, that gave us DLC as we know it today. During the 6th generation of consoles, DLC was seen as revolutionary, as with the rise of the internet, developers could patch out old bugs found in earlier versions, or just add on to games without needing to make an enhanced re-release, all at little to no cost. But with this newfound success came greed. Fast forward to the 7th and 8th generation, and you'll see downloadable content mired in controversy. Companies using DLC as an excuse to release unfinished games and finish them up post-launch, the infamous on-disc DLC acting as a paywall to access content you'd already paid for, the laundry list of shitty costumes, booster items, ridiculous pricing, and all of the other predatory practices that leads to the stigma DLC has today. But that doesn't mean DLC still can't be done right in our modern era. There's still plenty of great DLC from studios like From Software, Capcom, CD Projekt Red, Nintendo, and the subject of today's video, Monolith Soft. While this wasn't Monolith's first time creating DLC for their games, it was Xenoblade 2 that proved to be the most prolific entry in the series, not only in its exceptional sales, but also for the introduction of the expansion pass model. When Xenoblade 2 launched with a day one expansion pass, I was skeptical on if Monolith was like other studios and just released an unfinished game. Well, they kinda did in some aspects, and was just going to finish the game in DLC waves. I was pleasantly surprised despite the few rough edges here and there. Xenoblade 2 turned out to be an amazing game, and my favorite game of all time no less. So I was down for more content with Monolith's plans of the New Game Plus update in just a few months, and of course, the expansion pass. The post-launch for Xenoblade 2 was absolutely incredible. You were getting content like almost every month. It was like a never-ending buffet. But when data mine leaks began popping up about Shulk and Fiora appearing as blades in challenge mode, and details about the story expansion being set in the fabled Aegis War, to say that I was excited would be an understatement. E3 came along, and with it came the first glimpse of the story expansion, now known as Torna, the Golden Country, and I was so pumped. Seeing Laura, Adam, Mifra, Jin, and Bridget in this expansion, the Torn Titan alive and well, jazzy music, and the ability to play as the blades and swap between them and the driver on the fly? It was like Christmas for us Xenoblade fans. I still remember my reaction seeing it all. I think I had in a very old video that I'm not really proud of nowadays.
Hey, Malos. The edges. Oh, so is that what Adam looks like?
I've really come far with this YouTube stuff, huh? September couldn't come soon enough, especially since Torna will be dropping a week early for expansion pass owners and will be releasing a week later as its own standalone release. Judging from my excitement for Torna, you would expect, like my other videos on this series, I would ultimately play and fall in love with this game. But unfortunately for Torna, that wasn't the case. Compared to the other games which took me a few days to finish, Torna took me over a month to finish for the first time. It's due to Torna's many issues that we'll get into soon enough, but since then, I've done multiple replays of the expansion, and it started to click with me more. Things I found annoying on my first playthrough became a non-issue during the next. Why is that? Is it just the passage of time and me growing older allowing me to gain a new perspective? It's always perplexed me, and those are the questions we're here to answer. Did Monolith Soft knock it out of the park on its first outing? Or is their first expansion starting to show its age? It's time to return to Allrest and immerse ourselves in the era of the Aegis War. This is... If you've watched any of these retrospectives before, you know the drill by now. But if you're new here, This video will contain spoilers for the entire Xenoblade trilogy, so if you haven't played them, well, what are you doing here, man? Go play these games! These are some of the best RPGs out there, and I don't want to be the asshole unintentionally spoiling you, but if you don't care about that, welcome to the ride, I guess. One last thing before we move on. Did you know that 13.2% of you guys are subscribed? If you're enjoying the video, leave a like and subscribe, as it supports me and it contributes to my small goal of reaching 8.3k subs by the end of the year. Well, that's enough warnings and selling myself out. Let's dive in. Torna the Golden Country started development shortly after development on Xenoblade 2 was completed. Torna initially started out as one of the potential story concepts for Xenoblade 2 when it was in its prototype phase, but was shelved due to budgetary reasons, as Monolith would have to divert resources from the main game to Torna. So they took the important pieces from the concept and included it in the main game, which were the flashback scenes of Torna seen in Xenoblade 2. Torna slept on Takahashi's hard drive for an unspecified amount of time, until it was decided that a new story scenario would be developed for Xenoblade 2's expansion pass. When Takahashi caught wind of this decision, he knew this would be the perfect opportunity to revive the concept and tell the story proper. Of course, the Xenoblade team's regulars will be back for the expansion as well, including Xenoblade 2's character designer, Masasu Saito, bringing out the expressiveness of the characters with his distinct style. Torna was developed on a new version of Monolith's proprietary engine that they've been using since Xenoblade X, allowing for the environment to look even better. This new engine was a Torna exclusive and was incompatible with the main game, but it also gave Monolith an opportunity, selling the expansion as a standalone release. Development went smoothly until it was eventually released on September 14th and September 21st for digital and physical respectively. But details on this prequel expansion weren't as tight-lipped as you would expect. Around early May, the rest of the expansion pass was data mined by known Xenoblade data miner Moose Hunter, which revealed the return of Shulk and Fiora as blades, and a brief synopsis of Torna, including its setting and playable characters, which crushed the hopes of the delusional few who thought the DLC was going to be an epilogue. Like, who would think that would happen? Torna would have its official reveal at the convention that doesn't exist anymore. I miss E3. Including announcing that it would be standalone and that it would release 2 months from then, in September. Way earlier than anyone would have expected, as all we had for the date was Q4 2018. But September comes around and Torna the Golden Country released on September 4th, 2018, the critical acclaim from critics and fans alike, and is often regarded one of the best pieces of downloadable content, period. So now that we have our history lesson done, let's dive into Torna and see if it lives up to that reputation. An opener is crucial to any story, as it needs to set the tone for the audience in just a span of a few minutes, pages, etc. Xenoblade 2 opens with stormy skies as the camera pans out of the clouds to show the beautiful blue horizon that sets the tone for a hopeful and grand adventure, as it pans out to our main character. It's an appropriate opener for the more lighthearted story Xenoblade 2 is, but as expected, Torna goes in a completely different direction. Torna opens with a beautifully drawn sequence depicting Alres 500 years prior to the main game in an era of disarray as nations are fighting and titans are being sunk to the Cloud Sea's bed by the Aegis Malos. I just love this introduction so much. It sets the darker and mature tone in such a small amount of time, and that illustrated sequence of the war going on is so good. I don't know which opener I like more, this or Future Redeems. That's a tough one. But that discussion is for another time. After witnessing Malos' destruction of a Titan firsthand, we transition to some faces players from the main game will recognize. Jin and Laura. As the two are left with nowhere left to run from a pack of wild beasts, they are forced to fight, which transition us into Torna's many improvements to the overall game, starting with Xenoblade 2's glaring flaws, the pacing and tutorials. During the second half of Xenoblade 2's development, Takahashi had a desire to create systems that make it easy for players to engage with the game, and you can see this desire bearing fruit all throughout Torna. Xenoblade 2's combat was absolutely fantastic, with its gameplay loop of blade combos, driver combos, and bursting elemental orbs and chain attacks, giving that oh-so-dopamine kick. Even nearly a decade after its release, with multiple Xenoblade releases over that course of time. There's just something special about Xenoblade 2. What's not so special about Xenoblade 2, however, is the slow progression for all of your available tools in combat. Looking at you, Chain Attack in Chapter 3, the complete overload of information via the infamous tutorials, and the lack of a way to reread them led to many players dropping the game in its first few chapters. Unlike its 70+ hour bigger brother, Torna is a condensed 20-hour adventure, so nailing this was crucial, as you don't want a repeat of the main game, but Torna obliterates those concerns in just the first hour. The first battle gives a concise tutorial on combat, starting with auto attacks, arts, then auto attack canceling, a new mechanic I'll get back to in a moment, and lastly, blade specials. If you feel confused or you need to refresh yourself on a mechanic, you can always look back at them in the options menu. I'm glad it's here, but I do wish this could have been ported over to the main game as well, as it would be a substantial help for it, but better something than nothing at all, I guess. The Torn Titans Legacy region serves as our introductory and tutorial area, as you get introduced to some familiar faces from Xenoblade 2's main game, with Laura, a mercenary looking for her mother, and her blade Jin, the paragon of Torna 500 years before he becomes the man we see in the main game. The Legacy region is basically a straight line, but it teaches you all of the overall necessities from the main game, like collection points, field skills, and item crafting via the new campsites later throughout the game. The game gives you enough room to play around and get comfortable with these systems and mechanics, a huge step up from Xenoblade 2's opening hours. Alongside getting a hang of things as you journey down the Legacy region, we get more introductions to familiar faces. First is a young Mikhail, sole survivor of a burned down village who accompanies Laura and Jin on their travels. Next is Adam, the legendary hero spoken of in the main game. A young Mifra, and I mean literally, she's only woken for a year at this point. And Hayes. I'll get back to gushing about these fellows soon enough, but with each party member you acquire, you get taught a new mechanic at a steady pace, and by the time Minoff joins the team, you'll have all the tools you need in the span of 5 hours. This does wonders for the game's pacing, especially compared to the main game locking away chain attacks until you're about 15 hours in after giving you everything else in hour 3. But now let's switch gears and delve into what is easily Torna's biggest change, the combat. If there was a system in Torna that excelled on Takahashi and the team's goal the most, it would easily be the battle system. On a fundamental level, combat is relatively the same. You still auto attack, perform arts, blade specials and combos, and unleash devastating chain attacks. But what makes Torna's combat unique from its bigger brother is the small tweaks and big additions Monolith added with this expansion. Starting off with the first one, the ability to swap between driver and blade on the fly. Playing as the blades was always something I wish I could have done in the base game, and I was so excited when I saw you can do that in Torna's reveal trailer. Playing as Jin, Mifra, Hayes, Brigid, Aegeon, and Minoff, after seeing these characters in the main game as your companions, or just characters important to the story, felt so delightful. Couldn't help but have a smile on my face whenever I was controlling any of them, whether that was in battle or just traversing around the world. But playing as the blades isn't just another set of playstyles for you to dabble in. There's also a strategic reason for you to swap between blade and driver. When you take damage, instead of losing all that health, it'll be displayed as a red bar in your HP, and you can recover it by switching between your blade and driver, which can come in clutch at times. The switch mechanic also comes with switch arts, which also trigger reaction effects for driver combos. After you switch, there is a brief cooldown on when you can switch again, so during situations in battle, you have to think if you want to save that switch to extend your driver combo, or to use it to get yourself out of a pinch. An exceptional addition to Xenoblade 2's already addicting combat loop. While the playable character will be taking the vanguard, the blade or driver in the back will be performing rearguard arts, which are, to say it nicely, utterly dog shit. They say they give you buffs, but they're about as useful as Mio's chain order before and after we found out it was bugged. It doesn't help that they put rearguard arts on the upgrade menu, fooling you to believe that they're on the same level as your main arts, which can make ladder fights more challenging because the unaware player thought wasting weapon points on rearguard arts was a great idea. Unfortunately, I was one of those people in my first playthrough. Guess one of many reasons why my first Torna playthrough was miserable. Just an unfortunate blunder on a pretty good addition to Xenoblade 2's gameplay. The other new addition to combat is actually a new take on an old classic, that being the return of talent arts. Talent Arts in other Xenoblade games work off of either filling a gauge with auto attacks or reaching certain conditions like performing actions in line with your class's role in Xenoblade 3, but in Torna, these work differently. Rather than having a gauge to fill, Talent Arts can be activated when certain conditions are met, like having enough HP, being revived after dying in battle, or being at max affinity. The drivers tend to play in their risk-reward loop with their Talent Arts, spending HP for a powerful effect like instant art recharge for Laura, driver combo extension for Adam, and target lock for Hugo. While on the other side of the coin, the Blade Talent Arts are quite strong yet situational. Miffer allows for guaranteed evasion after being revived, Haze can incapacitate enemies at the cost of all of her arts, Minoff can double the damage of his arts at the cost of triple the aggro at max affinity, and so on. Glad to see Talent Arts back, as they, along with Vanguard switches, add a new layer to the combat and work well with the last change, the update the chain attacks. When you perform a blade special, an elemental orb will appear afterward, instead of from completing a blade combo, similar to Orb Master from the main game. Enemies also got a step up due to the elemental orb changes, with some enemies gaining elemental awakening, which allows enemies to deal more damage and reduce your blade combos. Unlike in the main game, which have blades that can remove this buff, you have to use a chain attack to get rid of the buff, which makes you think if you want to either tank the damage and stockpile orbs for a full burst, or just burst the orbs you have to remove the buff. This, along with the other two additions, creates a combat system that feels so kinetic in ways the main game could only dream of. No matter what playthrough it was, whether it was my miserable first playthrough or my recent replay, whenever I got into combat, I was always having a good time. But with releasing such restrictions, we do lose out on the slower and methodical combat that makes the big boy Xenoblade 2 so satisfying. But I gotta give my props to Monolith for not only making the combat have narrative relevance, but also just give new life to a battle system I've spent hours upon hours delving into, instead of just giving more of the same like other DLCs. If this was a full-size adventure like Xenoblade 1 or 2, it would get old pretty fast, but since this is a bite-sized expansion in comparison, by the time you feel you had your fill of Torna goodness, the game would soon be nearing its conclusion by that point. The only drawback being that the customization isn't as deep as it is in the main game. You still have all of the options to customize your characters like in the main game, well, minus the GOAT Poppy swap, but things are harder to come by, especially pouch items, since their acquisition now is tied to the crafting mechanic. The drivers can customize their element to mostly whatever they want, but I felt it wasn't that much of a game changer to me. At most, it helped me in some chain attacks when I needed some help bursting orbs, but even then, you'd only need one character to take that role in my experience, while the other two can just do whatever they want. So you can choose between a more confusing yet complex battle system with plenty of choices and blade combinations to mix and match with, or the simplified and faster paced version with depth of its own. Personally, I prefer the main game just due to how many options and blades you have at your disposal, like annihilating everything with Poppy, but Torna is still a fun time to play every now and then. I don't like ending this part on a sour note, but it's been bugging me ever since I found out. Torna added a new quality of life feature that allowed you to tell your AI party members to either focus on driver combos or blade combos. It's honestly such a neat addition, even though I didn't have much trouble with my party members triggering either type of combo in the main game. But you know what would have been extra neat? If the mechanic fucking worked. In the code, when you are trying to prioritize either combo, it does jack shit. So you just look like a dumbass taking time out of the fight to press them. Guess who was doing that the whole time and didn't find out until after their playthrough? It's just like a common theme with Xenoblade, you know? Like, Monolith can make some incredible experiences, but man, there's always some mechanic that just somehow doesn't work due to something happening in the code. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Manana. Just a small thing that doesn't detract from the gameplay in the long run, but man, it annoyed me by simply just existing. All this talk about mechanics, and I haven't even gotten to talking about the characters and their various playstyles. There are 3 teams, with each having a driver and a set of 2 blades, specializing in a specific role. Team Laura is our jack-of-all-trades team, with Laura putting out decent damage and her ability to break, Jin being the damage dealer with his crit damage and talent art, sacrificing recoverable HP for more stats, and Haze being our healer. These 3 have a fun gameplay loop, spamming arts and break with Laura, swapping Jin in for the topple and churning out some damage, or Haze for some heals, or even immobilizing enemies with her talent art. Overall, my second favorite team to play. Let's leave the best for last and go to my least favorite team, which is Team Hugo. Hugo's team is our resident tank, with him, Aegeon, and Bridget all excelling in that role. Hugo's talent art makes sure he will always take aggro, and man, it feels so good to play a Xenoblade game where the tank can actually, take aggro. After playing Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed and trying to use its sad excuse of tanks, I'm so sorry, Shulk. Coming back to Torna and seeing Hugo consistently take aggro was so cathartic after so many years. But I guess that's less Team Hugo being good and more how bad Xenoblade 3's tanks are. Both Bridget and Aegeon are fun to play as they have the same abilities from the base game, and you can build them into either evasive tanks or block machines. Bridget is really fun as an evasive tank and can churn out some decent damage if you have her set up right. And Aegeon is, he's fine. He does a decent job at blocking damage, but hey, at least his battle animations look cool. Yeah, that's all I got. Now on to the last and my favorite team to no one's surprise, Team Adam. Adam's team is focused on just dishing out damage, but even though I like Adam for his talent art that extends driver combos, his two blades are the real stars of the show. Mythra is a major highlight of Torna, both story-wise and gameplay-wise. Whereas in the main game she's calm and calculating, despite her tsundere tropes, here in Torna she's more aggressive and reckless seen throughout various cutscenes, and especially in gameplay. Her animations have a just get it done kind of feel to them. You can see especially in Photon Edge as Mythra consistently wails on the enemy with a barrage of strikes. Her switcher animation might be my favorite, with her doing a spin into an overhead slam head first with the full force of her sword. It just feels so satisfying when you connect it at the end of a driver combo, and even more when you connect it in a fusion combo. Just sends the right amount of dopamine to my brain. Mythra's affinity charm skills are nearly identical to her main game counterpart, barring some exceptions. Lightspeed Flurry got a slight nerf, but it's nothing a few art recharge pouch items can't fix, so you can still use that one brain cell on the art spam of your dreams. Her specials from the main game are now her arts in Torna, with her getting new specials like her up B from Smash Brothers, so finger guns when luring enemies, which isn't any benefit in gameplay, but it sure as hell looks cool. Remember Minoff? That one old guy who was at the center of the plot of Chapter 3? Well, in Torna you get to play as him in his golden years. Golden, you see what I did there? Because he's younger and the expansion is called Torna. But man, all of these characters have been sauced up to their animations and kits, but Monolith just blew their load when designing this fucker, and I fuck with it so heavy. Every single animation just oozes the cool factor. Like, come on, it's a dual blade wielding gunslinger that jumps and spins around, spraying bullets everywhere. How is that not cool? My favorite animation has to be his level 4 special, with him giving his blades to Adam and his little recoil that he does when taking the blades out from the ground. It's such a small and silly detail that brings me so much joy. Minoff's gameplay loop is about dishing out damage through his arts as attack cancels give him a flat damage increase for every cancel, dealing even more damage to uniques and bosses, and his talent art giving him double damage on his next art at max affinity. It's so fun to use his talent art and use Hurricane to deal a chunk of damage while also evading everything. Torna's combat is like a full course meal. The mechanics is the appetizer, the characters and their playstyles are the entree, and to top it all off, we got this banger playing in the background. I know I'm skipping ahead a bit, but Torna's battle theme is too good not to bring it up now. Kenji Hiramasu, bless your soul for bringing us these bangers every game. Monolith managed to rectify the issues of the main game and make a system people were so used to for hours on end feel fresh again. But that's enough about battle. Let's delve into the other half of Torna's content, starting with how packed this little expansion is. Fun real-time combat isn't the only thing the Xenoblade games are known for. There's also the massive worlds you get to explore. From the Bionis and Mechonis to Aionios, Monolith has always made living and breathing worlds for you to get lost in. All Rest is personally my favorite setting, even though Xenoblade 1's world of walking on the bodies of two dead gods is extremely close. There's just something about exploring the bodies of these living titans with people and cultures of their own that swim around in a sea of clouds with a massive tree in the center that's just so magical, you know? Like, it just speaks to my personal tastes, and I just couldn't get enough of it after my first playthrough years ago. Torna giving me another chance to visit Ulrus again was like a gift from the gods, but I did have some concerns. Since this was a smaller size expansion and Monolith's first story expansion, I was wondering if I would even have enough stuff for me to do for its 15 to 20 hour runtime. I also had the same concern when replaying Torna for this video, but it was because of Monolith's future works, especially compared to Future Redeemed's exceptional affinity goal system, with it tied to your progression, incentivizing you to explore every nook and cranny, that I thought their first outing would fall flat. But I was pleasantly surprised at how much stuff there is to do in Torna. The content here alone is well worth the $40 price tag, and adds even more value to Xenoblade 2's expansion pass. So, for the price of a 3DS game, you get two Titans. One brand new, and the other a spin on an old classic. First, we have the titular Torna, and I just love this Titan, man. All of the Titans have distinct designs, but the Torna Titan has got to take the cake for the coolest one. It's a goddamn dragon that was so powerful enough that it was murdering Titans left and right, and it was only stopped because it was sealed away. And don't forget, it's a fucking dragon. Automatic cool points right there. But outside of its design, it's quite a tiny little bugger. It's separated into three regions: Lysaria, Aletta, and Dagna. I've already talked about the Lysaria region enough already, so let's move on to the other two. The Aletta region is home to Aletta, obviously, which is a tiny region and has nothing much to write home about aesthetic-wise outside of Adam's Castle and the beautiful secret area you can find. Lastly, we have the Dagna region, which is home to Dagna Desert, my favorite area in the game. Just roaming around this massive desert with its sinkholes, sandfalls pouring out of the rock, and the oasis makes for some of the best daytime views. That, and it has the best secret area in the game. Like, oh, I could gush about this secret area for ages, but I'll spare you the senseless yapping for now. There's technically one more area, but we'll get there when we get there. Now onto our second Titan, which is Gormott 500 years in the past. Here we don't see it as a province of the Ardanian Empire, but as pure, untampered nature, which species we flat out don't see in the main game. Since Gormott is nearly 1-to-1 map-wise as the main game, it's easily the biggest Titan to explore, and Monolith plays on your prior knowledge of the area, hiding secrets in familiar locations. My favorite detail when revisiting Gormott is the color of the time of day, as it gives the Titan a vintage hue, like we're looking at a time capsule of days past, which we technically are. Gormott probably would have been my favorite area all around if Dagna Desert didn't exist. I just love how they brought it back. Despite Torna's smaller roster of Titans, that doesn't mean they aren't any less packed with stuff to do. You have your Xenoblade staples, you got your secret areas, you got your unique monsters, with tombstones now displaying on the map. We also get some improvements to Xenoblade 2's core mechanics, starting with the big one, field skills. Conceptually, field skills gave purpose to blades while you're out exploring all rest. They can help you open containers, earn more collectibles, reach high places, or secret areas, to name a few. These skills add a level of progression on par with your combat skills as you complete a blade's affinity chart. It makes the time deepening your bond with your blades worth it, as you're able to do more damage with your battle skills and specials, and you're able to explore more of the world by passing the required checks. But there are two key flaws to the field skill system. The first being that the checks aren't one and done. Say you had enough skills to pass by the first of a series of field skill checks, but not the second. Well, tough shit, buddy. You're gonna have to do it all over again. The second is the check only tracks for the blades that you have currently active in your party. So you'll have to go back into the menu, fiddle with the blades, and you can bypass the check, only to go back into the menu to change your party back to what it was beforehand. Make it double if you encounter a series of field skill checks and you don't have enough for the second one. Field skills on paper are an excellent addition to Xenoblade 2's sandbox, but these two flaws just made my time exploring Allrest more frustrating than it has to be. A big reason why I prefer exploring the worlds of the other games more. So, how does Torna fix this problem? I'll tell you how. They made the party smaller. Like, no, seriously. The game being smaller retroactively fixed all the flaws field skills had in the main game. Even if you have to redo a field skill check, you have your party members at all times, so even if you fail, all you have to do is just progress further on your Blade's affinity chart. It makes for a more satisfying feeling once you pass the field skill check instead of, oh, thank God I don't have to go into the menu again. Torna also added some new collection points, like the Ether Miasma deposits, and another one which can be unlocked via the new mechanic of Torna, the campsites. Campsites act as a skip travel point and a little base of operations for your party, a progenitor for what will later become the rest spots in Xenoblade 3. At the campsite, you can talk with your party, level up using bonus XP, or craft items via Torna's renewed focus on the crafting system. If you forgot crafting was a thing in Xenoblade 2, I can't blame you. Crafting was one of the Xenoblade 2's many underutilized and often forgotten mechanics. Outside of using the system for certain blades affinity charts and blade quests, and unless you were the maniac going for love sources, there was no point running around like a headless chicken, looking up guides for pouch items that were drastically inferior to the Marzipear jelly that you can buy in Argentum. Since Torna has a bigger focus on crafting, the pouch items you can craft are actually, useful. But all things come at a cost, as they are also infrequent compared to the base game, unless, once again, you're the maniac doing the riveting gameplay that is farming collection points for hours and hours on end. Pouch items aren't the only thing you can craft, as you can craft permanent upgrades through Adam and Hugo, so it makes those frustrating hours of boredom running around with the Xenoblade Wiki out for the one collection point that has a chance to give you the item you want worth it in the end. Yeah, probably. I wish there was a way to filter through what collection point was what, because trying to track all these collection points on Gormott was a nightmare. Makes me appreciate Xenoblade 3's quality of life features a whole lot more. Glad we are past the era of needing to use the wiki and Reddit to find collectibles for these games. Well, for the most part. Alright, mini rant aside, the crafting adds so much personality to our party, like Laura crafting charms, Jin having cuisine since he's usually the one preparing the meals, and Mithra's cooking skills leading to her creative cooking, to name a few. Even with my complaining about grinding materials, crafting actually makes you interact and explore the world if somehow, for some reason, Torna's other offerings weren't enough. Some more of Torna's new additions include the Barney Stones, which are mini combat challenges with a reward at the end, usually being a new crafting recipe. My favorite side content Torna has to offer is hands down the hunt for the slate pieces scattered around the Torn Titan. Collecting them all grants you passage into the Cavern of the Seal and access to Torna's super bosses, the Golden Beasts. You unlock them by using another mechanic you probably forgot was in Xenoblade 2, the information mechanic. I definitely did. Buy them off this comically small Nopon that's even called the Nopon Half Sage, and you can face off against Torna's most challenging enemies. Like any Xenoblade games, the super bosses are fun to fight, with all four having their own unique gimmicks to go up against. The first boss, Sentinel Carpathia, can't be broken by normal means, and the fight tests your smart use of Vanguard switches to topple it when it uses a break move and start a driver combo of your own. The second boss, Herculean Gibson, is just your standard Ardent fight with his extremely annoying combo of Horn Dance into Tank March. This fight tests if you have the necessary accessories to resist the reaction effects that Horn Dance inflicts and burst down the enemy. The third boss, Mesmer Telaluk, is the most unique and frustrating boss in the game. This Blant's gimmick is that it will eat up any elemental orbs you have to heal, fundamentally changing your playstyle as you're discouraged from using a part of your kit. On top of that, it has a move called Sweet Juice that enacts Doom onto your party. The logical reasoning will be to put on Doom resistant accessories and you'll be fine, right? Well, you're wrong, because Sweet Juice can still one-hit KO your entire party at moment's notice, and sometimes it does nothing at all. It makes what would be such a unique and fun boss trying to find the right window to get some orbs and chain attack before it gobbles them up into a head-slamming RNG roulette on if Sweet Juice will nuke you or just tickle you. Hurricane Anise is simply a DPS check, as once it reaches a certain threshold of health, it'll use Warning Cry and lock parts of your party gauge until you kill its minions, so the goal is to build up orbs and chain attack before it even has a chance to do so. I'm a personal fan of DPS checks in games, so this guy was right up my alley, and a nice change of pace after slamming my head against Telaluk 2 hours earlier. Overall, the Golden Monsters go 3.5 out of 4. They may not be my favorite line of super bosses, but they were fun nonetheless. To wrap up, the new systems and improvements Torna brought to the table has made it the definitive way to explore Allrest, and I kinda wish some of these were backported into his bigger brother. Alright, what's next on the list? Oh right, I just realized I haven't delved into the heart of this expansion. This wonderful main party. A main party has always been the heart and soul of an RPG. Okay, I'm gonna save you the preamble. It's a Xenoblade game. Of course the main party's good. My heart will forever belong to the Ulrus crew, having some of my favorites of all time, like my goat Rex, Nia, and the Aegis sisters. And their character arcs are ones that I'll remember till the day I die. The Torna crew isn't as good, but it's not really their fault when they have only a fraction of the screen time to play with. But man, they're just so lovable regardless. Let's start with our stars of the show, Jin and Laura. And these two, chef's kiss. Laura is just a positive beacon throughout the entire expansion, and it's refreshing to have a Xenoblade protagonist that's actually past the age of 18. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem playing as a younger protagonist, and some of my favorite characters fit into that teenager to young adult age range, but with Laura's maturity comes a new perspective. Sure, she may not grow as much as Rex, Shulk, Noah, or even arguably Matthew, but her story here, while short, is just as compelling, and I end up loving it more as time goes on. Laura coming to terms with her abuser and finally being able to move on, Jin's actions inspiring Laura to look after kids and eventually become the inspiration for Garfront Village, her interactions with both Jin and Haze are so cute and charming, and so on. There's a lot to love here, but my favorite has got to be about her fighting style. Xenoblade has always excelled in its harmonization of story and gameplay, with Monolith knocking it out of the park in the series' first outing, the Monado. A blade that can see into the future, that's used as a narrative device to not only foreshadow story events, but also plays into the core theme of seizing your destiny against fate, as Shulk and Co. change the future with their own hands, is easily one of the coolest narrative elements I've seen in gaming. Having this translate to gameplay through seeing and breaking visions is nothing but euphoric. Despite my own criticisms of Xenoblade 1's combat, it easily has the most thematically satisfying gameplay in the series. Torna is a close second though. Laura fighting with her fists because she was broke being the domino that fundamentally changes the way all drivers and blades fight has to be hands down my favorite narrative element to come out of this expansion. Initially, only Laura's party has access to level 4 specials, a way to signify her strong bond with both of her blades through gameplay. Our other two parties fought autonomously between driver and blade, and it's only after they team up with Laura and being inspired by her fighting style with her blades is when the autonomous pairs begin to fight as one. Like I said before, this is my favorite narrative element to come out of Torna because how thematically intertwined they made the simple act of performing a level 4 special, even more than they did in the main game, as they have to learn to work together and in turn, deepening the bond between blade and driver even further. It's also awesome how Laura's style, born out of necessity because she couldn't afford another sword, had such a vast impact on the world of Ulrus as a whole, changing how blades and drivers fight 500 years later in the main game. That in itself cements Laura as one of my favorite Xenoblade characters. And it's pretty funny that the entire modern blade system all originates from a girl being strapped for cash. One last thing about Laura I want to talk about is her voice, and by extension, Torna's voice work. I ain't even going to give y'all the preamble. I know it, y'all know it. Xenoblade 2's voice work was, to put it nicely, messy. It was front-loaded with spotty voice work filled with stilted lines and performances that are memed on to this day. All thanks to awful voice direction. But past chapter 3 and outside of a few notable exceptions, poor Weaver man, no one can make me hate your Rex baby girl. The voice acting is phenomenal, and each actor nails their lines all the way to the finale. The exceptional back half makes me look back at Xenoblade 2's voice work quite fondly, despite its awful first impression. So just like almost every one of Xenoblade 2's faults, Torna also improves on this in every way. Oh no. For the most part. There's still some weird line reads, but every actor just sounds more natural here, since for most of the cast, this is their second outing stepping into the role of these characters. Anna Koval does a pretty good job as Laura. She gives Laura such a soft and comforting voice, which just adds to her maturity.
I imagine that day's still a long way off, so don't worry.
Koval's performance would have been my favorite if not for two that I'll get to later on in the video. I don't usually mention the Japanese performances, as it would usually double the length of these sections alone. and the English VO is a far more interesting topic for discussion. But here is where I make an exception because Laura is voiced by Sayori Hayami, one of the all-time legends in the Japanese seiyuu business. If you've watched anime in the past decade and a half, you've watched at least something with Hayami's voice in it, and as always, her performance here, along with the rest of the Japanese cast, is exceptional. Hayami's performance gives Laura such a soft-spoken yet headstrong voice, and she just nails every scene.
縛られたくないの。何者にも縛られず、自分が信じたこと、信じた人の手助けができる。どこも自分たちが生きるのに精一杯でしょ。嫌なんだ、そういうの。
Honestly, it might be one of my favorite performances from her. It's really hard to decide which voice I prefer between the two. They're both really good. But that's enough about Laura. Any longer and I'd be reaching 4 pages deep on her alone, so on to our other star, Jin. And wow, this expansion did wonders for this man. Jin was already a character that I liked prior to Torna, but the new contextualization given here is what really made me fall in love with him. After completing Torna, you can really feel how much Laura's death weighed on him. Jin already had a slight disdain towards humans due to the destructive nature seen throughout Torna, but always had hope for change. It was only until Laura's death that he finally cracked. Seeing someone's ray of light be extinguished is enough to make anyone lose their sense of self, but I couldn't imagine the pain Jin went through for over 500 years. It makes for one of my favorite interactions between Jin and Malice in the final battle. Everything about this mere interaction is so good. The cinematography, Malice using Laura to further his point, proving that she's merely the outlier to humanity's true nature, all the while Jin, the one who was on the side of humanity, preaching about there being ways to affect change earlier on in the game, is rendered speechless. It makes for their reunion in the main game to be all that more impactful, as Malice was right and the hopeful Jin pays the ultimate price. But it was through those inklings of understanding these two had seen throughout Torna that led to their unbreakable bond, and it's always something I've come to appreciate more on the replay. A new appreciation for scenes or details is a common theme throughout the expansion, and you see it especially within our main character. One of my favorite scenes is the one between him and Laura right before she gets knighted. I love how they recontextualize Jin's mask, with Laura being the one who made it for him. It adds more weight to his character in the main game, with the mask being that last semblance of who he once was. It's a great detail to add for a part of his character design that I didn't even question up until now. Another one of my favorite scenes is when Jin finds his journal about his old life, as unlike other scenes that are presented near one-to-one with how they are in the main game, this one is presented differently. Whereas the main game shows the contents of his journal, Torna only shows Jin's horrified expression in his eyes as he's confronted with the dread of losing his memories of Laura and the horrors of the Flesh Eater technique. Instead, they save the aforementioned scene during the talk before Laura gets knighted, and the impact here just hits you like a truck, man. Just made an already great scene even better with this change. His interactions with Laura are always so charming, yet so heartbreaking knowing their fate in the end. On the topic of interactions, Jin has some of my favorites in the expansion as a whole, with his aforementioned scenes with Malos and scenes with Mithra being standouts. Just seeing his story in full here retroactively adds so much to the main game, like Chapter 5 for example. The main game states that Torna was an outlier to how blades were treated, with them being seen as equals rather than just as weapons, even though in the expansion itself we don't really see that at all, I guess minus the main party, but that doesn't count. Witnessing its destruction is so impactful as the ideals of coexistence syncs along with its titan. It makes Jin's conflict in the main game even better, with scenes like his question of why are you the masters and we the slaves hit even harder than they did prior. A tragic character made even better with this expansion. Ace kinda gets the short end of the stick in comparison to these two, but that doesn't stop her from being such a joy anytime she's on screen. She has an awesome design, her interactions with Laura are always so cute, she's afraid of ghosts, and she has some of my favorite post-battle dialogues. Seeing her interact and be with this party just makes her ultimate fate as a puppet of a Malthus so saddening. Having part of her core crystal cut in half, inadvertently prolonging the stagnation and decay of all rest, and even forced to face the one person she would call her family with no recollection of them. Adding more salt to the wound, in Torna, Hayes says that she couldn't imagine being the blade of a man like a Malthus. If that's not the perfect example of cruel irony, I don't know what is. You can tell Takahashi and the writers were having a field day with that one. But with this cruelty forced onto her, it does make her death at the hands of Jin bittersweet in the end, as despite lacking the memories of who she once was, her old friend freed her from the hands of a Malthus. TLDR, Hayes is cute. She deserved better. Alrighty, now it's time to talk about the funniest trio out of this expansion, Team Adam. Adam himself was one of Torna's many pleasant surprises, as I didn't expect to like him this much. In the main game, Adam was gassed as a stoic hooded hero who brought an end to the Aegis War, who had such an aura of mystique around him. I just wanted to know what his deal was, since he had such a massive impact during the main game, with him founding Fawnset, indirectly leading to the foundation of Tantal, sealing away the third sword and spirit crucible Elpis and Pyro, and driving me insane with those damn shadow clones.
Rogue.
It was one of the many things I was looking forward to upon Torna's announcement, and whew, Adam here is anything but the interpretation I had for him previously. He blew them out of the water. Adam's just so full of character here. He's so expressive and goofy, he weeps at sob stories, the father-daughter dynamic he has with Mithra is amazing, Paul Thornley's performance is mostly good, and he's just a delight anytime he's on screen. The legends didn't do him justice. He's just a charismatic man who, despite being a prince, is just your everyday man. He holds no desire for the throne and just wants to do whatever he can for the common folk, spend time with his family, and harvest the fields. But behind the charisma lies a man who's overcome by his own fears and insecurities. Fears that wouldn't be left unfounded. This, along with his relationship with Mithra, makes him feel so human, more than what the legends will want you to believe. And he makes for some great comedic relief, with me bursting out laughing when this man speaks sometimes. These traits make him one of my top 3 faves to come out of this expansion, right below Jin and Laura, and another character I've yet to discuss. Okay, I'm not gonna hide it, it's Mithra. Mithra. Oh, how Torna made me fall in love with you. Pyro and Mithra were already characters that I was strongly attached to, thanks in no small part to her relationship with Rex in the main game. But even after completing the game, I've always felt something was missing. Between the two, Pyro got more of the spotlight compared to her blonde other half. And while we got glimpses into Mithra's past, much like Adam, there was still a lot of mystique surrounding her. Torna finally decides to clear the air surrounding Mithra, and what's left is the most poignant story to come out of this entire game. As I alluded to in the combat section, Mithra and Torna is not the Mithra we see in the main game. Due to her younger age here, she's more cocky, reckless, and has a complete disregard for humanity. While she gets bullied throughout the game and spawned countless memes for the first 2 traits I stated prior, it's that last trait that the game hones in on. Throughout her journey through the Torna Titan, Mithra transforms from a blade who fights for the sake of her driver regardless of what happens to humanity, to a being with not only a newfound appreciation for humanity, but also becoming human herself. Her character growth is always an element of Torna I always come back to appreciate more and more on every replay. Her smile and nod to Milton as she and the rest of the party go and face off against Malice just encapsulates this growth in just a span of a few seconds. It's so good. But whereas her newfound humanity has become a great source of strength, it also becomes a source of tragedy. I'm keeping things to my chest till we reach the finale, but how Torna recontextualizes not only Mithra, but also Pyro is nothing short of brilliant, and turned the Aegis from a character I loved to one I adored. Despite how much I raved about him when raving about Torna's combat, I don't really have much to say about Minoff. I mean, he's a great character and all, don't get me wrong, and he has some of my favorite scenes with Lauren Gang, but I think he gets the short end of the stick due to how late he gets introduced. Still, the content he does get is pretty good, like being inspired by Laura for the creation of Garfont, and his interactions with the party are fun to watch. Before we move on to our last trio, I just want to talk about Milton and Mikhail. Mikhail isn't the smooth-talking idiot he is in the main game, but a quiet kid who was trafficked to a village that got burned down. he makes a friendship with Milton, and I love the bond these two have throughout the game. I already liked Milton with his interactions with Mithra, Adam, and Laura, but this replay made me really love the bond he makes with Mikhail, with Milton being a true friend to him. Great stuff all around, and it makes for some heartbreaking moments come the finale. Our last trio is Team Hugo, and they're just kinda... Hugo himself, aside from being a brilliant reuse of assets, is serviceable. He didn't have anything that really stood out to me, well, outside of his battle dialogue referencing the legends, the Ardanian soldiers. Aegean's also in this category as well. Like, he's cool and, yeah, that's all I got. Bridget was one of the standout characters in the main game, and I wondered what she was like during Ulrus's most turbulent era, and she kinda just came off as meh. She's just prideful and an ass sometimes, but her interactions with Mithra are always so entertaining that it sorta makes up for her being whatever. Unfortunately, we don't have any heart-to-hearts in the traditional sense, but we have many interactions via the quests and the dialogue from the campsites. The Xenoblade parties always had that big happy family feeling, and Torna just runs with it with the campsites. Something about having all your party members huddled up over an open fire just warms me up on the inside. It's one of the things I loved about Torna on my initial playthrough, and one I loved even more in Xenoblade 3. The campsite dialogue is like a reward in itself for finding them and seeing what the party might say next, and I've always looked forward to it. Lastly, I've got to bring up the post-battle dialogue because man, it's great. After playing Xenoblade 3 and hearing the same 5 lines repeated after 2 years, going back to Torna and hearing actual post-battle dialogue again was just music to my ears. Torna might sit in a distant third compared to its fuller-sized brethren, but it's still got some bangers here. Anytime there was dialogue from these guys, I always cracked a chuckle. Here are some of my favorites.
That was flashy as hell. Do that again, would you?
I don't see the need to show off without any eligible girls around.
Oh, Midoff, you're so dreamy. Can I have your autograph?
Keep talking, funny man. You'll get what's coming to you.
Thanks for the rescue, Hayes. You're nice.
Oh, thanks from Mithra? Well, there's something you don't hear every day.
Wow. I take that back. Hayes is the master of low-key shade.
Oh, Hayes, I've got a cracking ghost story for you.
You want to tell it now?
Yeah, it's a real spine-tingler. Grandad once told me. Kept me up at night for days.
No, please keep it to yourself. Blade combo, 3rd stage.
Awesome.
Why does that sound so familiar?
I hope the next Xenoblade game brings back more post-battle dialogue, because even though the travel dialogue of 3 is great, playing Torna just reminded me of how amazing it can be. And also, the post-battle dialogue does account for like 80% of the voices you'll hear in-game, compared to the travel dialogue's 5. So I would love some more variety in the next game. Torna's party is filled with characters I adore, and characters that are just but as a complete package, there are more than enough to be one of my favorite parties in the franchise. Lastly, I'll talk about the Torna exclusive characters, because yeah, they're all stinkers. If your name was not anyone in the main party, Malus or Malthus, I couldn't give less of a shit about you, and your only purpose existing is to either drop heavy exposition about Blade Eaters like Mr. Yapper McYapperson over here, or exist only for the sake of driving the plot like Zetter the Tornan King. Sure, yeah, they needed an explanation for Amalthus's rise to power at the end of the game, but I just don't care, even if Amalthus himself is a great character. I've yapped about Torna from a general perspective for a while now. I've sung its praises and criticized some of its lesser polished aspects as well. But now it's time to move on to Torna's midpoint, and it's here where this expansion starts to show its most glaring flaws. After hours of plot and character moments later, our party has been formed in full and now have embarked to the capital of Torna, Oresco. But before we talk about Oresco in full, I want to take a little detour to talk about Torna's music. Torna's soundtrack was composed by the Xenoblade staples of Ace, Manami Kiyota, Kenji Hiramatsu, and Yasunori Mitsuda. The music team decided to focus on acoustic instruments compared to the usual electric instruments in past and future entries to coincide with the story's mature tone, giving it a distinct feel among its bigger brothers. The compositions here are some of my favorites in the series. They're all so soothing, and I think the jazzy compositions really play into delving back into a bygone era. There's like one track here that's kind of like meh, and that's Lysaria Woodland. It's just okay. I've already talked about Hiramatsu's banger with the battle theme, so I won't go on about it here, but Ace went 2 for 2 with the Kingdom of Torna Day and Night and Gormont because god, the combination of sax, piano, and strings are just divine. Take a listen. I'll talk more of the OST as we go on, and the tracks I mention here are exceptional, but nothing could have prepared me for when I first walked into Oresco. Hearing those opening piano notes and strings for the first time made me put my controller down and just sit there as the piece continued to play. Not a lot of pieces of music makes me do that, and Oresco is not only one of my favorite cities in gaming, but also one of my favorite tracks ever. One of Kyoto's finest compositions. Oresco is our hub for NPCs and quests, and man, I just love the atmosphere of this place. Oresco may not be as grand as Fonzamaima or Alba Kavanich, but its smaller size really works to its benefit here. It feels that you really get to know everyone here, understanding their problems and helping them out via the many side quests. It feels like you're not only fighting to stop malice for the sake of the world, but also for the common man, but also serves as a harsh reminder of the cruel fate that will befall both this town and its citizens. So during your first arrival at Oresco, you head to the palace to go report to the Tornan King about Malice's motives to take the seal, and afterward, this event kicks off the incredible sequence of Malice's attack on Oresco. But before we do that, Torna's most infamous and glaring flaw begins to rear its ugly head. Community. Community is Torna's answer for Xenoblade 2's lack of the series' iconic affinity charts from previous and future entries, allowing you to keep track of characters and quests. It's nice to keep track of where people are throughout Allrest and which ones have side quests. Community would have been forever remembered as an excellent addition to the series if it wasn't for one fatal flaw. Like I say in these Xenoblade retrospectives, Xenoblade and pacing aren't always best buds. No matter what game you play in the series, there's always a pacing pain point somewhere, like Xenoblade 2's slow start, or Xenoblade 3's nosedive after stepping off Agnes Castle, but no game's pacing has been as egregious as Torna. And it all revolves back to the community system. After that cutscene with the Tornan King, you cannot make any progress until you reach community level 2. this isn't too bad, as if you didn't do any quests up until now, you just have to go back and do them. And if you've done all the quests, you'll be at community level 2 by the time you talk to the Torna King. The problem is, after you pass that gate, you basically get an hour and a half of story at most, until the game hates you again and tells you to reach community level 4. This is where all the common complaints and slander of Torna comes from. Side quest padding, forced side quests, and Torna the side quest country all come from these two pace killers of community gates. Unfortunately, those complaints aren't unfounded. The average Torna playthrough takes around 15 to 20 hours at least, with 10 of those accounting for side quests. Take those out and Torna would have the length of an average Xenoblade 2 chapter. Now it has the opposite problem with the pacing being too fast, so community serves a purpose in Torna's game design, but it comes at the cost of player agency. When you play the other Xenoblade games, or even other games in general, you have flexibility of doing things at your own pace. Xenoblade excels at giving the player flexibility on their playstyle, allowing them to play however they want. Do you want to rush the main story? You can do that. Do you want to take it slow and do everything the game has to offer? You can do that as well. It's all in the freedom of choice, but Torna doesn't give you freedom. It gives you an illusion. At first, Torna presents community as an optional mechanic until you're caught with your pants down with not only one, but 2 gates. Once you reach that first gate, you realize that the freedom of choice was just an illusion. You will not play how you want to play. You will play how Torna wants you to play. That's just so demoralizing. It happened to me during my first playthrough. I got to the first community gate and was a little upset, but I pushed through. I got through the quests and reached level 2 and got to see an incredible sequence, and right when I was getting invested again, I saw the level 4 community gate, and I've never felt so unmotivated to continue a game ever in my life. I felt the game was not respecting my time, and I just put the game down. I played other games for a few weeks until I was motivated by my Discord, and because my channel was primarily Xenoblade content, I picked the game back up. It felt like a grueling experience, sliding through every side quest just to get to level 4 and just be done with this game. I know the philosophy of community is to get attached to these characters, the town of Oresco, and the Torn Titan itself via the many side quests that'll hit like a truck that all these people either lost their homes or died due to Malice's attack. But to me, there were checks on a list to get past the gate. Their stories or even their deaths at the hands of Malos, I just couldn't give a damn. It led to me having bitter feelings after finishing Torna, and while I recognized the things it did well, community was too much of a deal breaker to ignore. It killed all replayability, as you would have to do it all over again, and just the thought of it was just so exhausting, with the New Game Plus features not being worth going through that slog again. But nothing prepared me for the whiplash I would get when I saw Torna's reception. I was dumbfounded when I saw people unanimously praise Torna, even put it above the main game. Hell, this praise was used to bash the main game even more than it was beforehand. Despite the game having the worst pacing and one of the most unfun game mechanics, it's better because, what, it didn't have a little cringe or gotcha? With it being my favorite game of all time, the discussion surrounding Xenoblade 2 was already exhausting, but this pushed me over the edge. It bled my bitterness towards Torna far deeper than just community's horrible implementation. The characters, gameplay, even the story. There was nothing that was immune by my bubbling hatred. There's a quote from Trunk's own Torna video, that you should really watch by the way, that really resonated with me when I watched it for the first time a few years back.
Than those aforementioned avid detractors in hindsight. It was one of those things where it made me passive aggressively ask, well, what's so great about Torna that wasn't great about Xenoblade 2?
It really encapsulated how much I felt about Torna during my adolescence. But in reality, I was just a stupid 16-year-old lashing out at people constantly bashing my favorite game, either low-hanging fruit or fallacious claims, constantly, and I was no better than the ones pushing that rhetoric in the first place. Obviously, I'm not the same person as I was 6 years ago. I'm 22 now, and I've got bigger problems to deal with than some loser grifting about Xenoblade 2 on Twitter for the upteenth time. But with my age came a chance to reflect. Fast forward 5 years and a quarter later, for this video, I decided to start fresh and do another playthrough of Torna. I was curious how it held up after playing Feature Connected and Feature Redeemed over the course of those 5 years. I was in a different mindset now, especially coming off recently binging the Trails/Kiseki series. Those games are built with the philosophy of helping the common folk, so it feels like you're encouraged to do every quest in those games, and it feels so rewarding to see your hard work referenced via the many NPCs throughout Zemuria. Also, don't get me started on the multi-game quest chains with certain characters. Those are just the greatest. So playing those games gave me an urge to go back and give Torna another shot. And in this playthrough, I loved every second of it. Since I was doing every quest I can, I was already at level 2 by the time I reached Oresco, and after I finished the sequence with Malos and completed every quest before heading to Azurta, I only needed to do 4 quests or add 4 people to my community to advance, but even after I reached level 4, I kept going. I even got the Super Mario Sunshine photo. Why? Because these quests are some of the series' best. There's some great quests that also have some accompanying quest chains and memorable moments. It's a shame that the game is structured around community, as it just sullies the quality of these great pieces of side content. Some of my favorites are the quests with Lyda as she strolls around with her blade, and we learn the origin of many Gormont landmarks like the Lyda Oasis and the Way Tree. Her quest chain with her father late in the game as they build a shelter for the people of Oresco, and gives Laura the idea of building a home for war orphans, inspiring Minoff. The Great Tornin Cook-Off is downright hilarious, especially with Adam, Milton, and Mikhail. They got some comedy gold lines here. A quest with the 4 Muskerbons pranking this old lady, constantly piling trash on where she walked, only for it to be revealed that they did it because they didn't want the old lady to be lonely. It's pretty sweet. The barrel quest with Mac Mac can be a bit of a grind, but the story here is nice, with it being revealed the head of commerce was doing illegal smuggling of red pollen orbs to get money, because all he wants to do is make his shopping ward as big as it possibly can be, with him being able to turn a new leaf after being caught. The quest with helping out Marcus to make a bug catching machine is awesome, and it's revealed in the final quest that he wanted to make that so he can make some medicine for his friend. But when that doesn't work, we rally everyone we know to go on an expedition to find the ingredients for the medicine so the girl can get better. It feels so satisfying and perfect for the culmination of your hard work throughout the entire game. This is only a small handful of the quests in this game, and if I talked about them all, well, I mean, obviously this video will be like double its runtime, so let's wrap up here. I feel that community being the way it is, while frustrating, is a necessary sacrifice so Monolith could learn from its implementation, and they did. Feature Redeemed has an even better community system, tying it into your progression itself with the affinity goal system, and it's not required to see its credits. Despite community's glaring flaws, the side quests in Torna are absolutely top-notch and should not be overlooked because of a flawed system. Now, with community done, let's get back to Malice's attack on Oresco. This sequence is awesome as you face off against gargoyles with the underutilized banger that is Battle in the Skies Above playing in the background before finding the man himself. I just fucking love Malice in this expansion, man. He's confident, arrogant, and most importantly of all, threatening. No matter what our party did against him during their fight, felt unstoppable. Also, David Menke was having the time of his life here, man. He was already the best performance as Malice in the main game, but here, he's fucking phenomenal.
They kill each other like they swat flies, running towards oblivion like blind rats. They see the divine flame of life and piss over it. They're genius at that. That's it! Perfect! That's the power that our father gave us! It's what the world has cried for since its birth! Me, you, we're here to give them what they want!
Every word just radiates what Malice is in this game. Confident, arrogant man, walking his path of destruction and not letting anyone get in his way. And God, can we talk about his battle theme for a minute? Making a remix of Amalthus's theme for Malice is just brilliant. Mitsuda and Abu Nasser hooked with Over Despair and Animus. cinematography in the scene and the cutscene right after the fight might be one of the best in the series. We all know the one. The party charges at Malos and dishing out blows, all the while the Endbringer is fending off their attacks as the camera pans around him. It's still such a cool shot, even after the eye candy Xenoblade 3 gave us. After the fight, the party is swiftly pinned down as Malos calls for more gargoyles while he takes the seal. Azir comes in for the rescue, but it's too late. Malos already got the seal and he heads for the core. We get some scenes with Gramps in the Torn Titan's womb, which makes the revisit you make to it in the main game even more depressing. Seeing all these blooming forms of life be relegated to corpses 500 years later. It's also pretty saddening for Gramps too, roaming the corpse of the Titan that birthed him. Next we have a scene with the Tornan King, which leads to Laura being knighted and becoming an official Tornan driver. Now, with the people of Oresco rallied, the stage is set for Torna's phenomenal finale. Even with all of their pacing problems, the Xenoblade games have always stuck the landing in their back ends, with Torna being no exception, and it's easily one of the series' strongest. It starts with the night before the final battle, and the party's decision to leave Mikhail and Milton behind. It leads to some really good scenes with Mithra and Jin, and you see the development in their relationship compared to their first meeting at the beginning of the game. After that scene, the party now heads off to the interior of the Torn Titan to face off against Malos. Now we have the final dungeon, the Torn Titan's interior. Initially, I was a bit disappointed that the Land of Martha's theme was the track for the interior, but playing it now, it's like a dark omen playing the theme of the Titan's final resting place. Other than that though, yeah, this place kinda stinks. Hell, even Future Redeem's Black Mountains felt more like a grand final push than, whatever this is. It feels less like a final dungeon and more of an excuse for Monolith to put Barney stones everywhere. I think it's nice that it recontextualizes the Barney stones into them being the Titan's antibodies, but after the third one here, I just didn't care. Doesn't help that it's also taking place inside of a Titan, an environment we've spent hours seeing in the main game, so it just ends up being forgettable in the end. What's not forgettable, on the other hand, is the final fight against Malos. The atmosphere captures the stakes here. Top Torna's highest peak, enveloped in dark and stormy skies around you and Oresco in the distance. There's only one thing left stopping you from ending this long nightmare, and that's the Endbringer himself waiting beyond those final stairs. The fight starts out similar to the previous Malos fight, now with some gargoyles to accompany him, but it's in the second phase where this fight becomes something special. After the first phase, we get a cutscene showing the team's struggle in their fight against Malos, the appearance and death of Xenoblade 2's second most annoying super boss, and a great interaction between Jin and Malos on Jin's stance on humans. We transition to the second phase, with Malos and Mithra both summoning their sirens, and an introduction to this fight's unique mechanic. The second phase replaces the party gauge with the siren gauge, allowing you to perform a special attack with siren to increase your damage output against Malos. It truly makes the fight feel cinematic, as the Torna team struggle and slowly whittle away at Malos, as Mithra's siren deals heavy blows at Malos's. With every hit that Mithra's siren deals, their determination grows ever stronger, and it feels so satisfying once you regain your party gauge and pull off that final full burst. After Despair and Hope is just a perfectly fitting track for this fight, just like how it was for the main game. It just easily captures the stakes in this final clash, as the weight of the world is in their hands. After finishing the second phase of the fight comes one of the most gut-wrenching cutscenes in the series. Not satisfied with Mithra's performance during their battle, Malos does the cruelest thing imaginable. He uses Siren to annihilate Oresco, with Milton and Mikhail caught in the blast. All our party can do is watch as the horrors unfold, with it dealing a major toll on Mithra. Stricken with guilt and grief over the fates of Milton and Mikhail, Mithra snaps and Numa's true power is unleashed. Adam, the hero, is brought down to his knees, as he couldn't control the weight of Mithra's true power. Mithra takes the sword from her driver and faces Malos head on. This entire scene is just so painful to watch, seeing Mithra's once soulful eyes be consumed by grief and rage as she unleashes everything on Malos is nothing but heartbreaking after her incredible development throughout the game. Becoming human was her greatest strength, but it also became her greatest source of pain. What elevates the scene even further is Sky Bennett's phenomenal performance. Her performance as Pyro and Mithra was already one of my favorites in the main game, despite some weird line readings here and there, but her performance in Torna is nothing but remarkable. Hearing her screams as Mithra loses herself is nothing but haunting. Mithra finally puts an end to her male counterpart, but it comes at a heavy price. Mithra returns to our party unconscious as they get rescued by a nearby ship as the Torn Titan sinks. We cut to our party having to witness their home fall beneath the cloud sea and the deaths of Hugo and Milton. With the horrors of everything she's done finally settling in, Mithra breaks down and creates a mask to hide behind. Pyro. You would think the game would end at this moment, but we still have a small bit to go. In the aftermath of Torna's fall, Adam heads off the Spirit Crucible Elpis and asks Laura, the head to Specia, to tell the soldiers to head to Leftheria once the dust is settled. But before we can see the credits, we have one more boss to deal with. A character I haven't really discussed about until now. Gort. Gort is Laura's abuser from her childhood prior to Jin freeing her from that abuse. Even after being free from a life of misery, he just keeps coming back into Laura's life like a parasite. First after her mother's death, now as a failed abomination of a Blade Eater. Initially, I didn't understand why the game ended on this guy instead of the incredible Malos fight prior, but now it's appropriately fitting to have Laura's final battle be putting down the demon that's been haunting her for all of her life. The track here, Our Paths May Never Cross, being an acoustic version of Jin's theme, is excellent, and it just feels so empowering in this fight as Laura finally frees herself from her past. Another banger from Mitsuda and Abunaser. After Gort, we have the ending, and whew, what a fucking ending. We see Amalthus' rise to Praetor and enacting the attack on Specia, Adam sealing away Pyro and the ancient ship, Jin's monologue, and all ending with a shot back in the ancient ship as Rex opens the door revealing Pyro. It's all accompanied by my favorite vocal track, bar none, A Moment of Eternity. Xeno vocal tracks have always been tearjerkers in their respective games, but A Moment of Eternity never fails to make me cry anytime I listen to it. After saving my game one last time, I was greeted by this title screen, accompanied by the piano version of A Moment of Eternity playing, and I just put my controller down and bursted into tears. Not a lot of games really do that to me. Hell, even Xenoblade 1 or Xenoblade 3 didn't make me cry in the same vein that Torna did. This is easily my favorite completion title screen, bar none. The piano with Pyro sealed away in the ancient ship is always a tearjerker anytime I boot this game up. But the best part about these expansions isn't just the stories they tell, but also the connective tissue they have with their respective main games. Much like its successor Future Redeemed, and it further pushing Xenoblade 3's core theme of letting go of the comfort of the present and moving towards the uncertain future, Torna further pushes Xenoblade 2's core theme of finding your place in this world. This theme is supported by others such as hope, change, stagnation, and bonds. These become intertwined often throughout the story like hope, change, and bonds. Let's explore these themes through the guise of our prominent Torna characters, Jin, Mithra, Malos, and Amalthus. Amalthus is the easiest one to discuss here as he represents stagnation. Amalthus is a victim of humanity's cruelty as he lost his mother at an early age, and his goodwill was turned against him. He climbs the world tree in search for answers from his creator, but he finds no god, only his tools. By awakening Malos, he didn't see his thirst for destruction as an imprint of his own, rather the architect's answer on how he sees mankind. He saw that his god hated humanity, so he continued to enact a delusion that was the architect's divine will. He commits atrocities left and right. He stagnates the growth of blades and severs the bond between blades and drivers, and is the sole reason for Jin's despair. Jin is a prime representative of our core theme. Jin has always been questioning his own existence, even in his past life. He assumed his purpose was to be at Laura's side, but it seemed it wasn't left to last. After losing Laura, Jin was aimlessly wandering around with nothing to fill the void she left, and it stayed empty until he reunited with Malos. After his defeat by Mithra, Malos began to question his own purpose, and it's that common ground that birthed a bond forming from their common lack of a purpose, search for answers, and their fuel for the world's destruction. Let's put a stopgap on Jin for now, as he'll come back when I start talking about Mithra. The two Aegises are representative of most of the themes listed here, but let's keep going with Malos for right now. Malos was initially an imprint of Amalthus' yearning of the world's destruction, but as his bond with Jin growed, he saw many things and formed bonds with multiple people. As he lived for years and years, a wretched being like Malos became human. Even his own thirst for destruction became influenced by Jin through seeing the tragedy that befell him. Even after Jin's death, he fulfilled his role as the Endbringer to test the wills of Rex & Co. Whose purpose is stronger? Malos' purpose to destroy, or Rex's purpose to fight for himself and move forward? That's what the final boss ultimately comes down to, and it's what makes it so great. Mithra's journey can be seen through her respective drivers throughout both games. In Torna, Mithra changes significantly throughout the game, but that change ultimately became her greatest source of pain, and she shielded herself with Pyro, another self filled with her insecurities. Adam, despite all he's done for Mithra, couldn't do anything because he failed to truly understand her. She may be a kind and lovable person, but she's also a blade that can sink titans to the Cloud Sea's bed. So his fear of Mithra's power created a wall between them that was never broken, ultimately became his biggest failure. Much like his blade, Adam took the burden of his failure alone and sealed Pyro away until humanity was ready. Taking the imprint of Adam's fears and insecurities, Mithra became afraid of herself and created Pyro. As I stated before, Pyro is the living embodiment of Mithra's own insecurities. Whereas Mithra's awful at cooking, Pyro's great at cooking. Mithra's abrasive, Pyro's kind and understanding, and the list goes on. Pyro can become the person Mithra's strive to be, all the while she isolates herself in her own self-hate. Well, until she meets her second driver, Rex. Rex himself, much like Laura, represents hope and change through his search for the fabled Elysium to change the fate of his dying world, and of course, he's similar to Adam in many ways. They're both optimistic, goofy, and they have golden eyes. But the big difference is Rex's youth and naivety. Because Rex was born in an era where the Aegis was just a myth, he could truly care for Pyro and Mithra, not as some all-powerful Aegis, but as a person. He has no reason to fear them. He didn't see some all-powerful blade with the power to destroy the world. All he saw was a girl in need of help. Scenes like the Morag fight at the end of Chapter 2 hit so much harder because of the added context Torna provided. Despite hearing Morag say that the Aegis sank Titans 500 years ago, Rex never changes his outlook on Pyro. Not one bit. It's just these little interactions that I love so much after Torna. But on the topic of scenes improved by Torna's added context, Chapter 4's first cutscene needs no introduction. Understandable that Mithra would lash out at Rex this way, given her own self-loathing and insecurities, wanting to isolate herself from the world she's done so much hurt to, but you can tell how much Rex's compassion stunned her. Those words and amount of support were the things she really needed the most. Honestly, I initially thought this was just her being a tsundere on my first playthrough, so looking back at the scene with the added context was nuts. Of course, Rex himself isn't perfect, and he has his own flaws that he deals with throughout the game. Rex deals with his dream to save everyone, proving himself worthy of being the Aegis' driver, and gets confronted by his inability to do so. It's these traits that gets him in the most danger throughout the game, and he gets brought down to his lowest by none other than Jin. It's through Jin, a blade who's seen as kind, treated as slaves by a man whose sole reason why Ulrus has been stagnant, that he receives a wake-up call. But instead of pushing forward like he always does, he gives up. Feeling the tremendous weight of losing Pyro and being unworthy of being her driver, Rex gives up. Another common link between our drivers. They both get confronted with their own failures. Unlike Adam, however, who took the burden of his failure alone, Rex has people around him. People who followed him on his journey. People who are captivated by his optimism and hope. People to remind him of his values, smack some sense into him, and get him out of his slump. Thanks to his strong support system, Rex can finally try to truly understand Pyro and Mithra, and this is where Adam comes in once again. Sure, his fear of Mithra led to him not being able to support her when she needed it most, and the destruction of his homeland, but in his failure came wisdom. Wisdom that he would pass down to his fellow driver, and man does it make the scenes of the Cliffs of Martha so satisfying. After witnessing Torna and seeing Adam unable to support Mithra due to his own fears, seeing Rex push through that barrier, fighting tooth and nail for them, accepting and loving them for who they are is so cathartic for their characters. Everyone talks about his speech to the Aegis girls, but his monologue in the scene just before that, just as good. Him approaching Jin and Malos instead of rushing in, realizing both Pyro and him were fighting different wars, his line of,
I walked in the shadow of the Aegis' light, blindly walking my own path, while she walked alone.
Good God, man, Chapter 7 was so good. But Malos and Mithra both show how much having people who love and care for you can change you. Change, purpose, and bonds. Now we revolve back to Jin, now that I've talked about Rex for a bit. Jin initially saw Rex as a fool, and that perspective was reaffirmed to him after their bout in Chapter 6, and seeing Pyro's condition. That all changed starting with their bout at the Cliffs of Martha, where Jin was visibly shaken when Rex states he found what it meant to be driver and blade. It takes a whole other meaning after playing Torna, showing Rex having the potential to be on the level of Laura, another in the outlier of humanity. Hell, Rex even questions Jin's whole reason to go to Elysium in the first place. The first time in years Jin felt questioned by his purpose after walking the path Mal showed him, but it all culminates in Chapter 9. Jin's final bout with Rex not only shows the strength of the party's bonds with their blades and vice versa, but I also like to think Jin also heard Laura's words at the end of Torna after hearing Rex. Jin, a man who's been searching for his purpose for his entire life, forced to live because of Laura's words, finally has hope for the world again. A hope that one day, that golden era where humans and blades walked hand in hand may shine once again. I also like just how Laura's final battle was putting down the demon who's been haunting her for her entire life. Jin's final battle is putting down the demon who's turned his life into a living hell and has haunted him for 500 years. Janely made an already good send-off to a character into an incredible one. Torna is a story of failure, but it's a failure that in many ways paved the way for our heroes in the future. An exceptional piece of downloadable content, and it's one that I and many others have remembered for 6 years and counting, and will remember for years to come. We've talked about the legacy of our Torna heroes in the world of Alrest at length, but not how they've touched many outside of the confines of the Nintendo Switch. As I stated before, Torna was unanimously praised from the moment of his release. The positive reception of it and the rest of the expansion pass saw aspects of the model put into future entries like DE's time attack mode and Future Connected, and expanded on the formula with Xenoblade 3's expansion pass. Mechanics and philosophies that started here got further expanded also in future entries. And if those game successes and bombardment of figures weren't enough for you, the recent announcement of Xenoblade X Definitive Edition definitely shows that the Xenoblade series is here to stay. It was nice giving Torna another dive again, finding love for an expansion that I once had bitter feelings over. Maybe I'll give Future Connected a second chance and give it the love it deserves. Yeah, probably not. In an industry filled with overblown budgets, crunch, remakes and remasters, and microtransactions galore, Torna reminded me of all the things I love about the medium. From a shelved concept to an expansion that's beloved by many, even with its flaws, and one that still holds up strong even among its peers. An expansion that proved downloadable content can still be done right in an era flooded with mediocrity. Thank you for all the things you've brought to us, and happy late 6th anniversary. Thank you all for watching the video to the very end. It's been a while since I've uploaded, and it's been a combination of a lack of motivation and my own insecurities with my work. The good news is that I have a new PC now, and this is the first video completely done on the new rig, so I hope the higher production value is seen here compared to the past videos, which were limited to my little laptop. I think the next few videos will be shorter in length compared to these longer retrospectives, because it'll be nice to take a breather in between dropping multi-hour long videos back to back, and you'll get more shifted Pyro content on a more regular basis. Hopefully. These videos do take a while to make, and I would appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. If you want to support me even further, consider becoming a member, as it would help my financial stability while I work on these videos. You get early access to videos, your name in the credits, and even able to send in video requests for me. This channel is a one-man job after all, so whatever support you all give will be appreciated, even if it's just a sub. But who would have thought Nintendo would randomly drop another Xenoblade trailer on a random Tuesday twice in a row, and one of the most requested Wii U ports no less? Was not expecting to wake up and see Xenoblade X finally get the remaster it deserved on Switch 1? Instead of Switch 2. Interesting to see them change up all the models and finally continue that evil ass cliffhanger after nearly a decade. It's gonna be fun to do another live stream before its release, and I even might do some streams with viewers doing online stuff. It'll also fix the concerns I had when drafting out my Xenoblade X retrospective, since I wouldn't be able to get any footage of the online component, since our glorious GOAT Nintendo Network was unfortunately shut down. But all in all, I'm very excited for XDE, as despite it being different from the main trilogy, it's still such a unique experience, and I'm glad more people are going to be able to play it. Last part to round out this outro is a small Q&A I had in my Discord. Funhow asks, how much do you like Ricky, or have you played X, and what did you like from it? Ricky's pretty cool. He's a good static character in Xenoblade 1, and he has some pretty memorable moments. I have played X before, and it is a good game. It's just different from the others. Like Xenoblade 2, some of its combat is poorly explained, but once you master it, it rivals 2 for me for how fun it is. Sawano's music is also a banger too, can't forget that. Ian asks, would you still love me if I was a worm? Maybe, but you are Hyan after all, so I don't know. Blade Gal asks, do you have any OC, and if so, what/who are they? Yeah, I don't really have any OCs. Sorry to disappoint. Another question from Blade Gal, is Xenosaga Freaks canon? Of course Xenosaga Freaks is canon, in all of its kitty glory. Ravioli asks, how would the following characters rank in a cooking competition? Jin, Pyra, Manana, Fiora, Miyabi, Gorg, Monikuri, Matthew, Lin, and lastly Mifra. Bazinga asks, ranking of the Xeno games? Just gonna put my tier list here. All of my opinions are correct and absolute. Link the Revia Rifomato asks, does Origin restore Nickel and Glimmer? I would assume so. I thought this was assumed after seeing 3's ending. Badge 1030 asks, why was I called here? I wonder that too sometimes. One of the many mysteries of life. Lastly, we have some questions from our resident jobless bum JB. Alright, I'm not answering all of these questions. You only get 2. JB asks, what is the meaning of life? I can say a joke answer and say play Xenoblade 3, but I think it's simply the act of living and doing whatever you can in the limited time you have. Who is your favorite Xenotuber and why is it JB Spearfreak? Sorry JB, you ain't my favorite Xenotuber and you're not gonna like my answer anyway. Alright, that wraps up the Q&A and this video. Once again, thank you all for watching. This is Shifted Pyro, and I'll see you all next time.